Monday, what is up? Welcome to Cozy Corner TV, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Kieran Smith. Call me Q. What's up, y'all? We back on the corner. Happy Monday, everybody. Do me a favor, guys, as you come in, hit that like button. Tell me where you watch it from. Be interactive in the chat. Say what's up. Say happy Monday. Don't be disrespectful in the chat because it's about the only thing over here that'll get you banned. Don't be disrespectful to moderators, supporters, subs, nothing like that. And you are free to talk over here. We will not censor you. Remember, guys, normal rules of engagement. Do be interactive in the chat. Keep your comments short, respectful, cordial. Don't flag the AI mod because it's crazy and then it'll block you. But with that being said, let's jump into the live stream. What's up, y'all? Happy Monday. Oh, man. Here we go, guys. 2026. I've been saying Happy New Year to you guys for a minute. This is it? Thursday? Yeah, it is. It's the first Monday of 2026. Look at that. Because last Monday was December 29th. All right. So, here we are. The first Monday of 2026. Here I am, still on vacation, approaching my time of getting ready to go back into the madness of work. We got some regular scheduled news clips to get into. Let me see. Let me pull this up for you guys. Hold on, chat. Alright, what we got up next? Because if I go, you guys know I like to go in order per thumbnail, right? That way, whenever you jump into the live stream, you could just jump in and see what part we're already up to. So first up, we got Rubio stutters in interview. Who covered this? Shout out to my man Keith Edwards. Keith Edwards is a channel favorite over here, guys. We react to Keith often over here. Go check his channel out when you get a chance. He'll be our first clip of the live stream. Keith covered Rubio stutters as interview goes wrong instantly. So we got a gentleman talking to Marco Rubio specifically about the United States governing / ruling Venezuela, and he's asking him, under what authority do you have to do this? So it's interesting, Marco Rubio's answer, and the interview goes on a little bit past that, so we'll look at that. We have oil companies reject Trump's offer, right? So yeah, we know he's shopping it around. Who covered that? I believe it was Young. Yep. Shout out to the Young Turks. Oil companies reject Trump's Venezuela offer. So we're going to take a look at that and see what's that all about. And then we got Jeffrey Sachs condemns the United States power. I think, what did he call it? He called it a, where's it at? A power move, right? He says that a power grab. That's what he called it. I was like, what did he call it? Yeah, Jeffrey Sachs blasts U.S. Power grab over Venezuela. Maduro captured at historic UN meeting. So we'll take a look at that. Then we also, for side news, we got Senator Tim Kaine demands answers on Venezuela operation. He says, I believe it's an illegal action. A lot of people do, if not everybody, but some people are just in favor of it being an illegal action. Medellin Buzz, the reason why I have that is because this YouTuber, I watch him often, so he covers news in Colombia, and he has Venezuela was attacked by the USA as Colombia next. So, I mean, I just think it's funny, just kind of like a little bit of the reaction to that, because we saw people asking, like, is Colombia next? Is Trump coming for Colombia? Eyewitness News cover, Mayor Mamdani talks to Queens bus riders about plans for free service. I said it. I said, this is why we're seeing so much W Mamdani, because the dude's charismatic as crap, man. It makes me so angry how charismatic Mamdani is, but it's like, you got to give credit where credit's due. I don't know what I'm going to do about this guy. He's driving me insane. Because it's like, I pay close attention to people, right? Like, I'm very attentive. I like to study people, right? You guys know this book called The Art of Seduction, one of my favorite books. Listen to me, man. This guy is disgustingly charismatic, and these people love him. They love him. All right, so let's jump into the first clip of the live stream. Shout out to Keith Edwards. Once again, Rubio stutters as interview goes wrong instantly. Let's take a listen.
If you're so profitable, why do you sell a course? Well, you know what? Here you go. I don't care. It's all free. I'm giving it away. We have like
This morning, President Trump was pretty clear yesterday. He said the United States is going to run Venezuela. Under what legal authority?
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine on their oil. That means their economy will not be able to move forward until the conditions that are in the national interest of the United States and the interest of the Venezuelan people are met. And that's what we intend to do. So that leverage remains, that leverage is ongoing, and we expect that it's going to lead to results here. We're hopeful that it does, positive results for the people of Venezuela, but ultimately, most importantly for us, in the national interest of the United States. We will no longer have, hopefully, as we move forward here, we'll set the conditions so that we no longer have in our hemisphere a Venezuela that's the crossroads for many of our adversaries around the world, including Iran and Hezbollah, is no longer sending us drug gangs, is no longer sending us drug boats, is no longer a narco-trafficking paradise for all those drugs coming out of Colombia to go in through the Caribbean and towards the United States. And obviously, we want a better future for the people of Venezuela. We want them to have an oil industry where the wealth goes to the people, not to a handful of corrupt individuals and stolen by, pirates all over the world. That's what we're working towards, and we intend to use the leverage we have to help achieve that.
Let me ask the question again. What is the legal authority for the United States to be running Venezuela?
Well, I explained to you what our goal.
You see how he did that? He said, let me ask that question again. What is the legal authority you have for the United States to run Venezuela, right? Now, Marco Rubio, he's going to get a little agitated. He's going to say, well, I explained to you, but he didn't actually answer the question. So let's run that back.
This morning, President Trump was pretty clear yesterday. He said the United States is going to run Venezuela. Under what legal authority?
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine on their oil. That means their economy will not be able to move forward until the conditions that are in the national interest of the United States and the interest of the Venezuelan people are met. And that's what we intend to do. So that leverage remains, that leverage is ongoing, and we expect that it's going to lead to results here. We're hopeful that it does, positive results for the people of Venezuela, but ultimately, most importantly for us, in the national interest of the United States. We will no longer have, hopefully, as we move forward here, we'll set the conditions so that we no longer have in our hemisphere a Venezuela that's the crossroads for many of our adversaries around the world, including Iran and Hezbollah, is no longer sending us drug gangs, is no longer sending us drug boats, is no longer a narco-trafficking paradise for all those drugs coming out of Colombia to go in through the Caribbean and towards the United States. And obviously, we want a better future for the people of Venezuela. We want them to have an oil industry where the wealth goes to the people, not to a handful of corrupt individuals and stolen by, pirates all over the world. That's what we're working towards, and we intend to use the leverage we have to help achieve that.
Let me ask the question again. What is the legal authority for the United States to be running Venezuela?
Well, I explained to you what our goals are and how we're going to use the leverage to make it happen. As far as what our legal authority is on the quarantine, I'm very simple. We have court orders. These are sanctioned boats, and we get orders from courts to go after and seize these sanctions. So I don't know, is the court not a legal authority?
That was a lot of words to answer a very simple question. No, there is no legal authority for the Trump administration to run Venezuela or any other sovereign country. And look, I want to be clear here right off the bat that I agree that Maduro was a brutal dictator and Venezuela is better off without him. But what is also true is that does not give Donald Trump any legal basis to engage in a regime change war with no congressional approval. I understand that there is no legal authority for the Trump administration to run Venezuela or any other sovereign country. And look, I want to be clear here right off the bat that I agree that Maduro was a brutal dictator and Venezuela is better off without him. But what is also true...
Shout out to Brian Tyler Colin. You guys go watch Brian's channel when you get a chance. So, yeah, I do agree with what he says. Maduro was pretty much a dictator. Not pretty much, he was. A horrible man. Things that he's done over there in the country and things that he was doing to the people. From a political standpoint, he's Freddy Krueger at best, right? But here's the thing. There's so many people over there celebrating because this happened, right? Like, you have some people upset, but you have people under the impression that a lot of people in Venezuela are upset about this, and that's just simply not the case. So that's why I wanted to still run some of this back. Even though it already happened, it's going to stay hot news for a little bit of time, just simply because, well, it was a hostile takeover, right? On behalf of the United States, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's finish watching.
is that does not give Donald Trump any legal basis to engage in a regime change war with no congressional approval. I understand that he thinks that he's the king of the world, but his autocratic ambitions are not licensed to plunge the U.S. into what may be a costly, protracted, and unpopular war. Note, too, that Rubio says, quote, "We want a Venezuela where the wealth goes to the people." Right. That's what this White House is looking out for, the Venezuelan people, which is why they overthrew a dictator and then left the rest of his regime in place. The vice president is literally the one who asserted power right after Maduro was arrested. So if this was truly about helping Venezuelans, then why are all of the same actors who'd been screwing Venezuelans right back in charge? To answer that question, I spoke with President Obama's former Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes.
I know Venezuelans who...
And this is part of the reason why President Trump is so... is why he's so skeptical about the vice president right now, because that's who she's been in place by. But that's why we watch both sides over here, right? Because Brian's making a good point. He's like, okay, so let's just appease you for a moment. If it was about the Venezuelan people, why just take Maduro and his wife and leave the rest of the government pretty much intact, in place, right? Saying that the United States is going to run it. Well, you have Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth stepping in, supposedly going to work with the vice president, even though I've said I don't know how long that's going to stay in place because Trump doesn't trust her. He's skeptical as hell of her because Maduro is the one who put her in place. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's not there that long. Let's just say that.
Who hate Maduro, who have friends and loved ones who are
right back in charge. To answer that question, I spoke with President Obama's former Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes.
I know Venezuelans who hate Maduro, who have friends and loved ones who are in prison down there, right? And some of them are happy today. But the tragedy to me is that Trump doesn't give a shit about that, right? Like, he's already dealing with the remnants of the Maduro regime. Like, he's already said he's not going to try to support putting the opposition in power. Now, that, not that would be easy either, but he's making no pretense that this is about democracy or a better life for Venezuelans.
It seems to me like his only priority here was that Maduro was too much of a bulwark against him being able to consolidate natural resources, but then the next guy in line, who I think is his female vice president, if I'm not mistaken, she won't be as much of a barrier, and so, okay, she can stay, because it was never, to your point, about human rights or anything like that. It was just about who's going to give him the clearest runway into consolidating natural resources, which of course he and his cronies derive some financial benefit from.
The worst state to live in right now is Delaware, and nobody's talking.
I think that's right, and I'd even take it a step further, Brian, and say, maybe Maduro, because Maduro is widely disliked. He's widely seen as having thrown the last election. Maybe he was the convenient pretext for, well, everybody can agree this is a bad guy, so this will be my way in to kind of get him out of there. But what I really want to do is get my claws on the oil. And again, if you think I sound like a lefty conspiracy theorist, that's what Trump said today. Right. Like, he was like, we need the oil back. It's our oil. They stole it. And we'll deal with the vice president. And then he basically said, and if she doesn't deal with us in the way that we like, we'll might come after her too. Right. It's just about it's like we're going back to the early 1900s here. It's about finding any form of a vassal state government that will just kind of defer to Donald Trump and his administration and U.S. oil companies in terms of what they're doing. So it puts the lie to that argument from these Republicans that, you support Maduro. No, what we don't support is an illegal war that has nothing to do with democracy, that could lead to worse outcomes. We don't know how things are going to play out in Venezuela, but also can lead to a world, Brian, I think this is really important, where there's just no rules anymore. What lesson does Vladimir Putin take from this about what he's allowed to do? What lesson does China take from this about what they might be allowed to do in Taiwan? And so there's just all these traps ahead. And so I think we can't...
It's funny to see how we saw what Putin did and everyone get upset about it, right? And then, because this has already happened, people are already like, oh, it's funny how we're condemning Russia for what they did to Ukraine, and then we turn around and we do this to Venezuela, even if it is an oil grab, right? And I can't even argue with that, because it's like, what does it say? What tone does it set? for China, for Russia, right? I mean, no, they're not going to come over here and just try to like overthrow the United States, right? At least not right now. They're not that crazy. But I mean, what does that say for countries that are way smaller than them, especially after they've just watched the United States do it? So this is where I think this is going to play out very interesting.
I hate it when there's like so much throat clearing defensively about, well, it's good Maduro's gone, because you either think this is a good idea or a bad idea. And I think this is clearly a bad idea.
And of course, to watch this full interview and all other interviews, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. It is and always will be 100% free. That link is right here on the screen and also on my YouTube page. But in other words, it was never about helping Venezuelans. It was solely about finding pliable leaders who would allow Donald Trump to pilfer another country's natural resources to enrich his friends at the oil companies. And that's not even conjecture. Last year, Trump told oil executives that if they donated $1 billion to his campaign, that they would get a, quote, deal because of the taxation and regulation they would avoid thanks to him. Well, a year later, those oil executives were gifted Venezuela. Trump made good on his promise because those are the people who paid for him to become president, so now he's returning the favor because it's always about his wallet. Now, with all of that said, I'm actually less interested in the there wasn't congressional approval part of this because, frankly, most people don't care about process. They care about results. And the reality is that this administration is broadcasting that their priority is expressly not taking care of Americans, but rather in engaging in regime change wars in South America. That is what they're putting above health care for Americans, food assistance for Americans, jobs for Americans, revitalizing manufacturing for Americans, lowering inflation for Americans. Apparently, this administration has no time for any of those things, but to do George W. Bush-era foreign invasions for oil, well, there's clearly all the time in the world for that. So while I think it's certainly a fair point to bring up the baseless nature of this new war, from a political perspective, I think the much more potent point is that this is just one more example that this administration does not give a shit about everyday Americans. Trump has spent his time not giving opportunities or lowering costs or expanding healthcare or growing jobs right here at home, but rather heaping more wealth.
And this is the only thing to what Brian is saying is this, right? Because it's very subjective. Some Americans are going to feel like Trump does give a crap about them and he does care because their gas prices are going down, right? For people who travel for work state to state or across the country. They care about that stuff tremendously, right? Single moms care about things like that. All of this is going to be important to somebody.
More power, more influence onto himself and his rich pals. This White House ballroom is a testament to that. This Qatari jet is a testament to that. His gold-encrusted Oval Office is a testament to that. He is broadcasting who he's looking out for. And here's a hint. It's none of his own supporters who didn't donate millions to his campaign. And one final word on Marco Rubio, who is the subject of this video. If you're wondering why and how he's able to debase himself like this, it's because he doesn't actually stand for anything. And if you need proof of that, just listen to Rubio's own words from way back in 2016.
You compared Donald Trump to a third world dictator yesterday in an interview with the New York Times. How so?
Well, I don't know about a dictator. I said a third world strongman. He's running for president, so no matter what, he won't be a dictator unless our republic completely crumbles, which I don't anticipate it will. But yeah, here's what happens in many countries around the world. You have a leader that emerges and basically says, don't put your faith in yourselves, don't put your faith in society, put your faith in me. I'm a strong leader, and I'm going to make things better all by myself. This is very typical. You see it in the third world. You see it a lot in Latin America for decades. It's basically the argument he's making that he single-handedly is going to turn the country around. We've never been that kind of country. We have a president. The president is an American citizen who serves for a period of time, constrained by the constitutions and the powers vested in that office. The president works for the people, not the people for the president. And if you listen to the way he describes himself and what he's going to do, he's going to single-handedly do this and do that without regard for whether it's legal or not. Look, I think people are going to have to make up their mind. I can tell you this, no matter what happens in this election, for years to come, there are many people on the right, in the media, and voters at large that are going to be having to explain and justify how they fell into this trap of supporting Donald Trump.
Oh, it's interesting for Brian to play that, right? Do we remember that side of Marco Rubio? Was that presidential candidate Marco? Because, man, he sounds strongly against Trump. Now he sounds very different. Now he says things like, don't mess with this president. Okay, I hope people start to realize that if you mess with this president, you're going to have a bad day. This is the stuff Marco Rubio now says about his own president, right? This is the stuff that Marco Rubio now says about Trump. So, what do we say? W, Secretary of State, or no? All right, guys, let's jump into the next clip. Oil companies reject Trump. So we'll keep following that, of course. Marco Rubio in his interviews. I actually like Rubio's interviews, dude. He spazzes out a lot. It doesn't bother me. He doesn't spaz out. He just gets angry. And like a lot of the times he's like, I don't know why this is hard for you to understand. I don't know why you don't get this. And it just cracks me up. All right. So oil companies reject Trump. That's our next clip. We got the Young Turks covering this. Shout out to the Young Turks. Let's go over there.
The Wonder Oven Pro is an 8-in-1 non-toxic air fryer toaster oven. Now with 2
And so far, the answer is a oil companies had a fascinating response to President Donald Trump, who asked executives in said oil companies if they have any interest in returning to Venezuela once Nicolas Maduro is ousted in a regime change war. And so far, the answer is a hard no. That's what Politico is reporting, and I am super shocked by that. Cenk, what are your 2 cents?
Yeah, it's definitely surprising because Venezuela appeared to be picked first because it has the largest oil reserve in the world, and we almost always attack countries with large oil reserves. But I think that I have a different theory on why we're going there, and it might surprise you. So let's find out why it might not be the oil companies, and then talk about why we might be going to war with Venezuela anyway.
So the answer that Trump...
Listen, W, Chad, SC, Ray Wolf, trust me, I understand. The Young Turks. I can't stand mainstream media news, that's for sure. But all of you guys that hang out with me every single day, because we go live here every day except Sunday, you guys know we watch both sides over here. So can't stand the left, can't stand the right. As far as I'm concerned, they both lie. And we as the American people have to watch everything and piece it together. So believe me, don't like CNN, don't like Young Turks, don't like MSNBC, a lot of that. But we do watch everything over here because it's TV, and we gotta collect the facts, right? We gotta collect the data.
Received, which I'm sure he didn't like, from these oil industry executives is likely due to the current oil markets, right? The fact that the oil supply has been increased, which means more supply, prices come down. So the U.S. benchmark oil price was around $56 a barrel as of Wednesday afternoon, and that's actually the lowest it's been since January of 2021. Here in California, we're not feeling the relief because they tax the crap out of gas here, and we're still paying like at least $4.50 a gallon if you're lucky. But anyway, this has given Trump some wiggle room to attack Venezuela without too much concern about oil prices being impacted to a point where things are unaffordable. So it's like, all right, I got some wiggle room. But the increased supply is also having the opposite effect on these oil companies. Those prices are also way too low to entice companies to take the risk of pouring huge investments into the crumbling Venezuelan oil facilities that former strongman Hugo Chavez seized decades ago, industry officials and analysts said. And I want to just quickly correct something that I said on the show yesterday. Trump said something about how Venezuela stole our oil, and I'm like, what? What does he even mean by that? I think he's referring to what Chavez had done under his leadership. And so U.S. oil companies have better investment options elsewhere, according to one person who's familiar with the discussions. And then 2 people familiar with Trump's efforts say that the administration has only recently started initiating the outreach to the industry. It's not as straightforward to convince companies to risk capital in an uncertain political environment, one of those people said. Now, I've got more details on Trump's conversations with these oil executives. So, for instance, Evanon Romero, who is a former executive at the Venezuelan state owned oil company known as Petróleos de Venezuela now works as a consultant in Houston and is actually part of this opposition effort against Maduro, right? So in late November, the Trump administration met with Exxon, ConocoPhillips, and representatives of the Venezuelan opposition group, to which Romero belongs, although he wasn't at this particular meeting. The meeting was led by the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, and the discussion centered on the possibility of the two oil majors returning to Venezuela, right? Now, Romero said Exxon and ConocoPhillips aired concerns about the debt they are owed from their past Venezuela operations, and the Venezuela representatives floated the opportunity to take control of additional fields to compensate for the debt. So what does that mean? So U.S. oil companies were actually operating in Venezuela. Chevron still does. Chevron has some sort of deal with Venezuela, and apparently they're happy with it. It's working out for them. But other oil companies were also operating out of Venezuela previously. This is like in the early 2000s when Hugo Chavez suddenly decided to force them to give majority stakes of their projects to the, Petróleos de Venezuela, to the state, essentially. He wanted to nationalize the oil. So Venezuela ended up seizing the assets of companies that resisted, and that's the debt that these oil companies are referring to. Now, again, Chevron has been the sole major oil company to continue working in Venezuela, operating under a special license to produce oil in the
And that special license, Chevron's been happy with for years. They've never talked about not being there. The question is, what's going to happen with the debt? Who's going to take care of the debt? Do we think Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth are going to be willing to fill in that gap? I don't. Not with what the United States has going through with our own debt, right? I don't think they're going to be willing to fill that. Nonetheless, it's still there. So someone's going to have to do something about it.
Country and then export it to the United States. But Romero said that Wright, again, Wright's the energy secretary, encouraged the companies, quote, to get an understanding and solve their outstanding problems along the way, end quote, but made clear, this is an important part of the story, made clear the Trump administration would like to see more Venezuelan crude flowing to U.S. refineries. I thought that was an interesting part of the story because Trump very recently trashed the oil in Venezuela. It's like, it's nasty oil. We don't want that oil. It's like, is it though? Finally, Romero says, we need those barrels. That's an important message from the government. So,
yeah. So a couple thoughts on this. So first off, the oil companies oftentimes get outrageous deals with these countries. Why? Because they threaten to have America invade them if they don't. So that has a long history. In the 1950s, we deposed the leader of Iran because he wanted the Iranian people to have a larger share of the oil profits. And so the oil companies forced Britain and America to get rid of them. And that's what eventually led to the Ayatollah. So it's possible that Hugo Chavez was saying, yeah, but it's our oil, and we're paying you way too much, and the Venezuelan people should keep more of it. Now, if they had a previous deal and they should honor that deal, okay, fine, right? But in terms of a country deciding what to do with its own natural resources, that's not theft. No, you taking their natural resources at the point of a gun at lower prices is theft. So I got no love for Hugo Chavez, but that is very far from theft when you actually control your own natural resources. In terms of oil companies, they've got two different conflicting things here. One is sometimes oil prices are so low that it's not worth drilling anywhere, let alone riskier places, right? And risk could be for a number of different reasons, including what type of oil it is, and that makes it more expensive to drill in those places, right? But when you start a war with an oil-rich country, usually because of that instability, oil prices go up. So I'm still surprised that they wouldn't want it. But apparently, if this story is to be believed, then I can see why they wouldn't, right? For the reasons that I just gave you. There are many circumstances in which it might not be profitable for them. Right. Well, then we've got to pick a new reason why we're going to war with Venezuela if that's not it.
Don't forget, Noble Mobile's saving you a ton of money. So a lot of people are signing up now
and beginning to realize $50.
Honestly, the Cuban refugees who came here in the late 50s are just as zealous as the Zionists are about their own political project. So I do think it's ideological for Marco Rubio. And for Trump, obviously, he personally is motivated by the oil. But, I don't begrudge the oil executives for actually being smart and remembering, hey, Venezuela burned us before.
I mean, he's personally motivated by the oil. I would say that's the only thing he's motivated by. Look, so many people thought that Trump went in and did this for so many different reasons. I heard so many different things. But it's like at the end of the day, paying attention to him, because I did it his first term, I do it now. It's like the guy's a money guy. You know what I mean? Venezuela has some of the most richest minerals on the planet in that place, right? Other than the oil. So it makes perfect sense. Even when he was talking about things with Zelensky in Ukraine, what was the most important thing on the table? The minerals. Like, this is it. Like, this is the thing that Trump, he even mentioned this stuff during his campaign. So when he's making these types of moves, it makes perfect sense. Of course it was a power grab. Of course it was an oil grab, right? What does it look like for the United States to run Venezuela? Honestly, I do not know. But I know that the United States doesn't run its own country like a third world country. So we shouldn't be going over there doing anything crazy, right? I'm not sure how long this vice president is going to stay in place. I really don't see them leaving her there long. I see them leaving her there for some time, but I really don't, like, between Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio, I just don't see them leaving her there for a long time, especially Pete Hegseth. Like, these guys, they like their power. They like to be in control. I don't see them being okay with using her as a barrier or a filter of some sort. I just don't think that's going to work out.
Or are we really going to take that risk again? So we'll see how this plays out. But I am curious if these meetings and these discussions maybe motivated Trump to avoid talking about going to war with Venezuela during his address to the nation.
Yeah. Yeah, Anna, from my point of view, look, normally this would be mainly about the oil. Now this is the second big clue we've had that it might not be in this case. We shared a previous story before about it as well. So that, and it's usually a confluence of factors that leads to a dramatically wrong decision like this. And defense contractors always get rich from war, of course. Israel apparently has an interest in this because they claim Venezuela and Hezbollah and Hamas are working on drones together, so they want them destroyed and smashed to pieces. Is that a large factor? Probably, just because of the overwhelming power they have. But my best guess is this is driven by Rubio. And you're right, Anna. If there's any second group in the country that's as zealous as the pro-Israel folks, it's the Cubans.
Yeah.
And you can't talk them out of it, and anything but annihilating the Cuban government is unacceptable to them. Anything other than that, right?
And I disagree with them wholeheartedly on this. I don't think that the U.S. should be dragged into a war with Venezuela in order to eventually lead to the toppling of, the communist regime in Cuba. I think that's ridiculous. It doesn't mean I hate Cubans. In fact, I have quite a lot of admiration for Cubans. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and it looks it's so easy, right? Anna's husband's Cuban, and we all have Cuban friends. Who would hate Cubans? What a weird thing to be, right? But does that mean we have to agree with them that we need to go topple the Venezuelan government so we can topple the Cuban government? And if we don't agree, are we anti-Cuban? No, of course not. The only ones who use that trick are the Israelis.
Exactly.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, right? Because for places to be, I think Jake makes a good point, right? That it's just simply, it's not affordable, right? We can't just automatically assume that Trump's being rejected. We know that there are a lot of countries and world leaders that actually do want to work with Donald Trump, whether they can stand him or not, simply because they just like the way he moves, they appreciate the way he goes about things. So there's not much we're going to be able to do about that. There are some people that want to get in bed with this guy. They're not ashamed of it, and they're going to do it, right? So nonetheless, I'm interested to see in how this plays out. who's going to be willing to do business with Trump, why they're going to be willing to do business, how long they're going to be willing to do business with him. I think all of this is going to be interesting. So let's jump over to the next clip where we have Jeffrey Sachs condemning the United States for their paragraph. Of course, this is going to be in regards to the Venezuelan president, the minerals, the oil, his wife, all the things. Let's check it out.
What does it feel like to step into the Athens tube? Kinda like, revolutionary cage technology.
Mr. President, distinguished members of...
I now give the floor to Mr. Jeffrey Sachs.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, the issue before the Council today is not the character of the government of Venezuela. The issue is whether any member state, by force, coercion, or economic strangulation, has the right to determine Venezuela's political future or to exercise control over its affairs. This question goes directly to Article 2, Section 4 of the United Nations Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The Council must decide whether that prohibition is to be upheld or abandoned. Abandoning it would carry consequences of the gravest kind. Let me offer some background. Since 1947, the United States foreign policy has repeatedly employed force, covert action, and political manipulation to bring about regime change in other countries. This is a matter of carefully documented historical record. In her book, Covert Regime Change, political scientist Lindsay O'Rourke documents 70 attempted U.S. regime change operations between 1947 and 1989 alone. These practices did not end with the Cold War. Since 1989, major United States regime change operations undertaken without authorization by the Security Council have included, among the most consequential, Iraq 2003, Libya 2011, Syria beginning in 2011, Honduras 2009.
So in total, what is he saying? In total, he's saying that, listen, even though these things have happened, these regime hostile takeovers have happened, they've never been okay, right? They happen, and presidents go about them and they do them, but these are not okay, especially when we do it in a way where kidnappings are involved. Jeffrey Sachs was pretty pissed about this. So there are other clips where he's reacting very differently and he's not as calm about it, but you can clearly see that he's upset about it and he doesn't appreciate the way that Donald Trump went about it, but he's trying to hold his composure.
Ukraine 2014 and Venezuela from 2002 onward. The methods employed are well established and well documented. They include open warfare, covert intelligence operations, instigation of unrest, support for armed groups, manipulation of mass and social media, bribery of military and civilian officials, targeted assassinations, false flag operations, and economic warfare. These measures are illegal under the UN Charter, and they typically result in ongoing violence, lethal conflict, political instability, and deep suffering of the civilian population. The recent U.S. record with respect to Venezuela is also clear. In April 2002, the U.S. knew of and approved an attempted coup against the government. In the 2010s, the United States funded civil society groups actively engaged in anti-government protests. When the government cracked down on the protests, the U.S. followed with a series of sanctions. In 2015, President Barack Obama declared Venezuela to be, and I quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. In 2017, at a dinner with Latin American leaders on the margin of the UN General Assembly, President Trump openly discussed the option of the U.S. invading Venezuela to overthrow the government. During 2017 to 2020, the United States imposed sweeping sanctions on the state oil company PDVSA. Oil production fell by 75% from 2016 to 2020, and the real GDP per capita declined by 62%. The UN General Assembly has repeatedly voted overwhelmingly against such unilateral coercive measures. Under international law, only the Security Council has the authority to impose such measures.
Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith.
On the 23rd of January 2019.
So he's being explicit saying only the Security Council has that right, meaning not the president, right? So he's not saying that for no reason. He's being explicit about why he's saying it.
19, the United States unilaterally recognized Mr. Juan Guaido as interim president, and a few days later froze approximately $7 billion of Venezuelan sovereign assets held abroad and gave the designated authority over certain of these assets. These actions form part of a continuous U.S. regime change effort spanning more than 2 decades. In the past year, the United States has carried out bombing operations in 7 countries, none of which were authorized by the UN Security Council, and none of which were undertaken in lawful self-defense under the Charter. The targeted countries include Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and now Venezuela. In the past month, President Trump has issued direct threats against 6 UN member states, including Colombia, Denmark, Iran, Mexico, Nigeria, and of course, Venezuela. Members of the Council are not called upon to judge Nicolas Maduro. They are not called upon to assess whether the recent U.S. attack and ongoing naval quarantine results in freedom or in subjugation. Members of the Council are called upon to defend international law, and specifically the UN Charter. The realist school of international relations, articulated most brilliantly by John Mearsheimer, accurately describes the condition of international anarchy as the tragedy of great power politics. Realism is therefore a description, not a solution for peace. Its own conclusion is that anarchy leads to tragedy. In the aftermath of World War I, the League of Nations was created to end the tragedy through the application of international law. Yet the world's leading nations failed to defend international law in the 1930s, leading to renewed global war. The United Nations emerged from that catastrophe as humanity's second great effort to place international law above international anarchy. In the words of the Charter, the UN was created, quote, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind. Given that we are in the nuclear age, failure cannot be repeated. Humanity would perish. There would be no third chance. To fulfill its responsibilities under the Charter, the Security Council should immediately affirm the following actions. The United States shall immediately cease and desist from all explicit and implicit threats or use of force against Venezuela. The United States shall terminate its naval quarantine and all related coercive military measures undertaken in the absence of authorization by the UN Security Council. The United States shall immediately withdraw its military forces from within and along the perimeter of Venezuela, including intelligence, naval, air, and other forward-deployed assets positioned for coercive purposes. Venezuela shall adhere to the UN Charter and to the human rights protected in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Secretary General, I recommend, should immediately appoint a special envoy mandated to engage relevant Venezuelan and international stakeholders and to report back to the Security Council within 14 days with recommendations consistent with the Charter, and the Security Council should remain urgently seized of this matter. All member states should refrain from unilateral threats, coercive measures, or armed actions undertaken outside the authority of the UN Security Council. In closing, Mr. President and distinguished members of the Council, peace and the survival of humanity depend on whether the United Nations Charter remains a living instrument of international law or is allowed to wither into irrelevance. That is the choice before this Council today. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Sachs for his briefings. I now give the floor to Ms. Mercedes de Fratea. my apology. I now give the floor to Ms. Mercedes de Freitas.
Good morning. I speak in Spanish.
The truth is, making more income isn't actually going to make you wealthy. Structure does, and I learned this the hard way. I've been over-leveraged, then I went completely debt-free, but neither of those built real wealth. What worked was learning how to structure leverage and liquidity together. That way, the same dollar could do multiple jobs at once. That's what most people miss. They invest once, and then they hope. But sophisticated investors, they do it different. They engineer layers: liquidity, leverage, tax efficiency, and then long-term growth. This way, each decision reinforces the next. Now, at the Wealth OS workshop, I'm teaching the layered framework that I use here. And here's a simplified example. So take layer one. We'll use like a life insurance, a liquidity layer. And this is a high cash value policy earning, modest tax advantage returns. But it gives me the ability to borrow against it for deployment elsewhere. It also provides both liquidity and death benefits. And then I can borrow against it and go into layer two, something say like real estate, which gives me leverage and tax benefits. So I'm using that capital, say, as a down payment. I get leverage with the financing, the tenants pay down the loan, the property maybe appreciates over time, and I get depreciation write-offs that I can reduce my taxable income. Now I have more money, I've been able to keep more of my income, and it goes into layer three, and that could be Bitcoin or some asymmetric upside. And so I'm taking those tax savings that were freed up, and I'm putting that capital towards Bitcoin. Now, sure, it's a little bit volatile, but it's shown historical appreciation, and so I treat it as a long-term, high-potential allocation. Now, you don't need every layer here, right? You don't need them all at once. You don't need to overhaul your entire life, but you do need a better system. You need a better system for the money that you already have, and that's exactly what I teach at the Wealth OS Accelerator event. It's a 3-day live workshop starting January 7th. We'll break down how to structure capital properly, identify what's missing in your current setup, and map out a practical path forward. If you're ready to stop guessing and start engineering your wealth, click the link down below, and I'll see you there.
We continue our coverage of the U.S. military capture of Venezuela's president and his wife. Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores are due to appear in court in New York City at noon local time to face drug-related charges. In Washington, Trump administration officials plan to brief members of Congress on the operation later today. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia joins us now from Richmond. Senator, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Speaking of this briefing later today with members of Congress, thank you so much. What do you think the White House needs to tell Congress in this briefing?
Well, they need to explain why this is legal. I believe it's an illegal action because we're not supposed to be at war without a vote of Congress. They need to tell us why it's a smart thing to do. The U.S. invading another nation, a not-legal action because we're... Well, they need to explain why this is legal. I believe it's an illegal action because we're not supposed to be at war without a vote of Congress. They need to tell us why it's a smart thing to do. The U.S. invading another nation and knock over its leadership gives a green light to other dictators around the world like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping to do the same. They need to explain what the purpose is. Is it knock over its leadership gives a green light to other dictators around the world like Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping to do the same? They need to...
Ultimately, is that what you guys think? Do you think that this gives Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping the right to do the same thing? Todd C., shout out to you. Do you guys that, because everybody's saying that this is what it promotes. Now, granted, some of you are probably like, well, they're not going to come over to the United States and do anything to Trump. Right. Like, they're not going to do anything to America. It's a great chance because they don't want to start World War III. But what about a different country? What about a much smaller country? Does this give them the right to do it now that they've seen the United States do it to Venezuela? I mean, they've seen Putin do it to Ukraine. And they've seen the United States get all angry about it and us puff out our chest about it, but then turn around and do the same thing to Venezuela. So do you guys feel like that this authorizes Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping to do the same thing? The same thing, meaning what the United States just did to Venezuela?
to explain what the purpose is. Is it narco trafficking efforts, counter efforts? Is it oil? Is it regime change? Is it this bizarre Don Roe doctrine that says we can dominate all nations in the Americas? And they need to explain to the American public why this is a smart thing to do. 63% of the American public say President Trump shouldn't have done this without coming to Congress. And what the American public wants is the administration to bring down costs on food, housing, healthcare, childcare, building supplies. Why is the U.S. engaging in this kind of illegal adventurism? There's a tall order, many questions that the administration needs to answer. And thus far, they've not even been willing to do it in a single public hearing since September 2nd. They only do it in the skiff because they want to hide the rationale from the American public.
So, Senator, what is the role of Congress here? This operation went forward without a lot of members' knowledge, but you do have the power of the purse. Do you plan to use that to have influence?
Yes, there are two levers that we intend to use. First, I predicted that Donald Trump would do this, and so before Christmas, I filed a resolution to seek the termination of all military action in Venezuela, absent a vote of Congress. That war powers resolution will come up for a vote this week in the Senate. Second, we're in a discussion about the defense appropriations bill right now that needs to be resolved before January 30. And I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that says no use of appropriated funds for U.S. military actions against or within Venezuela. And we'll seek a vote on that. So you'll likely see both power of the purse, but also just a straight out war powers resolution to say no military action without a vote of Congress, which is what the Constitution requires.
Let's stay right there for a quick second. Even if that passes the Senate and then the House, it would need to be signed by President Trump himself, correct? So why move forward with that resolution if that is unlikely?
Because it's what the Constitution requires. Whether Donald Trump wants to follow the Constitution or not does not give a pass to members of Congress to not follow the Constitution. And we had an earlier instance of this. I filed a war powers resolution against war against Iran during Donald Trump term 1. It passed both houses. Donald Trump vetoed it, but after he vetoed it, we noted that he backed off of some of the unilateral military action that he was waging against Iran because he understood what a vote of Congress meant. It meant, hey, our constituents are saying we're tired of war. Focus on the economy. Focus on running America.
So Tim Kaine, he's not shy about this. He said, this is not the first time I've heard him talk on this subject, but he literally has said before that he believes that this was a criminal act, that he thinks that this was illegal. Donald Trump had no right to do it, especially because he didn't consult with Congress first. And nonetheless, I know that sooner or later he's going to be one of those guys on the Democratic side that are in favor of impeachment. I know it because the way that he talks about it. He has already explained his disdain for it. He does not appreciate it. He does not like it. And he thinks that it was an illegal act.
Erica, you're saying you're going to run Venezuela now when the American economy has got flashing red lights and smoke coming out of it? Focus. And we think a strong congressional vote, even if President Trump chooses to veto it, will send him a message that may cause him to rethink the foolishness that he's engaged upon.
And Senator, speaking of that running of Venezuela, President Trump said that the U.S. needs total access to the oil.
I'll run that back. Shout out to Rick Howland. Rick said he didn't have to consult with Congress first. Oh, Rick, I agree with you. There's plenty of things that state that the president does not have to do that, but you have people that are going to disagree with that, and they're always going to go to that first because we saw that with the strikes as well, right? We saw that with Soleimani during his first term, that people were like, hey, he's not going to Congress. He's not, consulted with Congress before he does these things, not realizing that he does not always have to do that. So I totally agree with you, Rick. Shout out to you for being interactive in the chat.
In Venezuela and threaten the
interest that he's coming out of it. Focus. And we think a strong congressional vote, even if President Trump chooses to veto it, will send him a message that may cause him to rethink the foolishness that he's engaged upon.
And Senator, speaking of that running.
You see, this is where I had this question, right? Because I was thinking about this yesterday, and now I see somebody say something ridiculous, and I have to just ask, right? So Nick Whelan goes, he broke international law, Goober, right? So he could be talking to anybody in the chat. He's saying that Trump broke international law. So this was, I thought was interesting. Bill O'Reilly a couple nights ago when I covered something that he said on the live stream. You guys know we listen to Bill O'Reilly over here pretty often, right? He said that the United States does not recognize international law, right? And that's the reason why Putin could go to Alaska and he doesn't get arrested or anything like that, right? This is why when Mamdani said that if Netanyahu went to New York, he would have him arrested. Bill O'Reilly said that he hopes that Donald Trump tells Mamdani that that's not something that he could do, and that President Trump could then in return have Mamdani arrested because we do not recognize international law, right? Okay, so I was thinking about this last night. Now, I know a lot of my subscribers, my viewers that return are a lot older than me, so you guys in the chat help me out, because I can tell you right now, 60% of my subscriber base is 55 to 65 plus. So I know I got some wisdom here in the chat with me. If we don't recognize international law, like how did this actually happen with Venezuela, right? That's why I'm thinking it's just a power grab. It has to be a power grab for the oils and the minerals, right? It can't be because Maduro was starving his people, right? It can't be that they were eating out of, trash cans and bags and off the streets in trucks, right? It can't be that, people were dying of starvation. It has to just be a power grab, right? Because if no laws were broken because we don't recognize international law, right? How could that have happened? How could it have happened? If we recognize international law, surely President Trump went and got Putin and his wife, right? Like, for sure. This is why Colombia right now is sitting here like, oh, are we next? Like, and I got a clip for us to watch, regarding that. But yeah, if we don't recognize international law, how did President Trump break international law? How did this happen? Because if we did, there's no way that Putin could go to Alaska, right? So with Maduro, it can't be what he's doing to his people. It has to be the oil. It has to be the minerals. It has to be a money thing.
Of Venezuela, President Trump said that the U.S. needs total access to the oil in Venezuela and threatened the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, that if that does not happen, she will, quote, be in a situation described worse than Maduro if that access isn't granted. What do you make of that?
No, Nick, come on, man. I know that Bill O'Reilly's not an expert on international law. That's ridiculous. Bill O'Reilly's not an expert on anything. Except, well, what he does, like his journalism. He's quite good at that, especially in his older age. I'll give him that, Nick. But I'm saying that he was the one that went on the record. And then, of course, people followed him. But to say that we don't recognize international law, because that's the reason why Putin can go to Alaska. So when you said that he broke international law, regardless of who you were talking to in the chat, it's like, how can you support that? How can you support that President Trump broke international law if that's not something that we recognize over here? Now, that's something that we're asking you because you're in the chat saying that that's something that President Trump broke.
Well, we talk about the congressional vote. Even if President Trump chooses to veto it, we'll send him a message that may cause him to rethink the foolishness that he's engaged upon.
And Senator, speaking of that running of Venezuela, President Trump said that the U.S. needs total access to the oil in Venezuela and threatened the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, that if that does not happen, she will, quote, be in a situation described worse than Maduro if that access isn't granted. What do you make of that?
Well, when we talk about confusing, there was an election that produced a winning slate a year or so ago that Maduro wiped out, and the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, won a Nobel Peace Prize. President Trump yesterday said she didn't have the respect to actually run Venezuela, and so he's ushered in a vice president who was Maduro's right-hand woman, who yesterday claimed that the attack was motivated by Zionists. The president has ushered in this particular wingnut to run Venezuela, hoping that she will cooperate with the United States, I would suggest she shouldn't lay down any money in Vegas on the fact that that will happen.
Senator Kaine, thank you for helping us unpack this. We appreciate you joining us this morning.
My name is not important. All you have to know is that my...
Yeah, I don't think President Trump supports that wingnut as much as Tim Kaine thinks he does. He has been very skeptical about her. He has said it, even the press conference he did at the White House, that was one of the very first things he brought up, where he said that, I'm not sure about her because Maduro put her in place, so he seems iffy about it. You know what I mean? That's why I said I don't see her being there. I don't foresee her being there a long time. I feel like at the beginning it makes sense because Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth are not familiar with running Venezuela, and eventually, obviously, they're going to turn it into some type of United States thing to some extent. Clearly better than what it was under Maduro, but who knows what that actually looks like. But I just don't foresee her staying there for a long time. I wouldn't even be surprised if they handpick a guy or a girl to go in that place and just replace her. All right. So we're going to move on to the next clip of the live stream. We are going to go to Keith Edwards. Shout out to Keith. Rubio stutters as the interview goes wrong.
I was trying to.
This is a broken individual. This is the face of someone who understands the severity of the reactions. Unfortunately for Marco Rubio, this is a man who might actually somewhere have a conscience, but has suppressed it in order to get power. How's that working out for you? Now, he was on This Week, an ABC morning show, answering questions, well, not really answering questions, avoiding questions about who's running Venezuela. And surprise, surprise, doesn't seem like anyone knows. Now, that is why The Atlantic is reporting that some of Trump's closest allies have told The Atlantic that they were unnerved by the president's brash no plan for tomorrow approach to ousting a sovereign nation's leader. And Trump, for his part, in his announcement yesterday that I showed you, made no mention of wanting to spread democracy or allowing Venezuela's opposition, which the United States has recognized as the legitimate winners of 2024's elections, to take power. And that person is Maria Corina Machado, who in a landslide victory in 2023 won 92% of the vote. 92% of the vote. But Donald Trump doesn't want her. He doesn't want her in there. In fact, what he's done is he's made it so the vice president, someone who's aligned with Maduro, is still in power. So what the hell is the point of all this? I'll tell you what the point was. It was all about oil. Let's get to this interview first. This is honestly, this is so damning. This is so.
There it is. And I know Keith Edwards is not going to be afraid to say it. It's all about oil. It's all about minerals. It's all about money. It's all about power. Essentially a power grab, right? And even the people on the right are saying this. Even people that voted for Trump are like, this was such a obvious power grab that it's crazy how obviously and disrespectful this was, right? Like just going there and grabbing an entire man and his wife, right? Now you have some people that are super supportive of this. Like they're like, yeah, that's my president. Yes. And then you do have your people that are like, that's disgusting the way he went about it. Nonetheless, like I said, it's not like Trump went and took some country's pope. That's not what happened.
So I could not believe this. So Stephanopoulos asked Rubio that Trump said that the U.S. is going to run Venezuela, and he asked, under what legal authority? Bro.
This morning, President Trump was pretty clear yesterday. He said the United States is going to run Venezuela. Under what legal authority?
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine on their oil. That means they're...
Oil.
Well, first of all, what's going to happen here is that we have a quarantine on their oil. That means their economy will not be able to move forward until the conditions that are in the national interest of the United States and the interest of the Venezuelan people are met. And that's what we intend to do. So that leverage remains, that leverage is ongoing, and we expect that it's going to lead to results here. We're hopeful that it does.
So I didn't say this in the last clip, but see what happens is the gentleman asks under what legal authority does the United States have to do this? And Marco Rubio doesn't talk about authority. He talks more about leverage. So that's where he goes. He goes like, well, basically, we have the oil. So they're not going to be able to do anything as long as we have control over that.
Positive results for the people of Venezuela, but ultimately, most importantly for us, in the national interest of the United States. We will no longer have, hopefully, as we move forward here, we'll set the conditions so that we no longer have in our hemisphere a Venezuela that's the crossroads for many of our adversaries around the world, including Iran and Hezbollah, is no longer sending us drug gangs, is no longer sending us drug boats, is no longer a narco-trafficking paradise for all those drugs coming out of Colombia to go through the Caribbean and towards the United States. And obviously, we want a better future for the people of Venezuela. We want them to have an
Really big filibuster there, but he's asking under what legal authority can Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, and the rest of the administration do this? And notice how he doesn't answer, but George Stephanopoulos actually asked him again.
For the United States to be running Venezuela.
Well, I explained to you what our goals are and how we're going to use the leverage to make it happen. As far as what our legal authority is on the quarantine, I'm very simple. We have court orders. These are sanctioned boats, and we get orders from courts to go after and seize these sanctions. So I don't know, is the court not a legal authority?
So is the United States running Venezuela right now?
I really wish he would have followed up on that, but I'm glad he followed up at all, because what the does that mean? Because we have legal orders to go after boats that, by the way, we still don't know whether or not those boats actually carry drugs. We don't know. There's no evidence one way or the other. But because they have a legal authority from the courts, they're allowed to just take the leader of a country. That doesn't make sense to me. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I've explained once again, I'll do it one more time. What we are running is the direction that this is going to moving forward. And that is, we have leverage. This leverage we are using and we intend to use.
Bro, this is scary. He's not answering. Who's running the country?
Started using already. You can see where they are running out of storage capacity.
He's not the first person to say this. So many people have been like, dude, why isn't Marco Rubio answering these questions? We're starting to get worried. Like, that we're used to, no, he's not answering the questions. I could actually agree with. I was like, Marco Rubio's actually dancing around some of this. This is interesting to watch.
And to go after and seize these sanctions. So I don't know, is the court not a legal authority?
So is the United States running Venezuela right now?
I really wish he would have followed up on that, but I'm glad he followed up at all, because what the does that mean? Because we have legal orders to go after boats that, by the way, we still don't know whether or not those boats actually carry drugs. We don't know. There's no evidence one way or the other. But because they have a legal authority from the courts, they're allowed to just take the leader of a country. That doesn't make sense to me. Does that make sense to you?
Now, so in defense of what Keith is saying, you have had people that have wanted some real hardcore evidence. Some say that they've seen it, some say that they haven't, right? If these boats are full of drugs, where are the drugs? Why can't we as the American people see pictures? Why can't we see the evidence? Why do we only have to see it one time and assume that every single time you guys are blowing up a boat or you're sending some type of strike that this boat is filled with massive amounts of drugs, right? So in Keith's defense, there have been other people that have said things like that. Nonetheless, Marco Rubio's argument is we have a court order, right? To George Stephanopoulos' question.
You?
Well, I've explained once again, I'll do it one more time. What we are running is the direction that this is going to moving forward. And that is, we have leverage. This leverage we are using and we intend to use.
Bro, this is scary. He's not answering. Who's running the country?
Started using already. You can see where they are running out of storage capacity. In a few weeks, they're going to have to start pumping oil unless they make changes. And that leverage that we have with the armada of boats that are currently positioned allow us to seize any sanctioned boats coming into or out of Venezuela, loaded with oil or on its way in to pick up oil, and we can pick and choose which ones we go after. We have court orders for each one. That will continue to be in place until the people who have control over the levers of power in that country make changes that are not just in the interest of the people of Venezuela, but are in the interest of the United States and the things that we care about. That's what we intend to do. The legal authority is...
Well, he was asked again, go to George Stephanopoulos, let's just, maybe just, I don't know, give some, like, I do think that when journalists do a good job of pushing back, especially in this environment, we should lift them up. And I think George Stephanopoulos actually did a good job pushing back on Marco Rubio. So give him some love in the comments. But he asked him again, point blank, who is running the country?
No, I do too. I mean, mainstream media drives us all crazy because we don't get the truth. But I can appreciate somebody that's going to push back and be honest about it. And I think George Stephanopoulos did a good job here. Sometimes we'll see, depending on where they go, right, whether it's left or right, they'll go on certain mainstream networks that will kind of cater to them and kind of softball their interviews. I can appreciate George Stephanopoulos pushing back on this. And you know, he lets Marco Rubio answer the question, and then he proceeds to just say, so yeah, again, since you didn't answer me, I'll just ask you one more time. So shout out to George Stephanopoulos for holding his own ground during the interview.
Orders that we have.
When the president was asked yesterday who'll be running Venezuela, he said it was you, he said it was the defense secretary, he said it was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Are you running Venezuela right now?
Jordan, I explained again that
he looks terrified. He's like,
Jordan, I explained again.
He said it was you, he said it was the defense secretary, he said it was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Are you running Venezuela right now?
Jordan, I explained again that
he looks...
Man, it's kind of crazy. All he had to do was say yes or no. And Trump said it during the press conference. One of the reporters asked him, like, who specifically will be running Venezuela? And Trump said, well, largely it'll be the people behind me. He had Marco Rubio to his right. He had Pete Hegseth to his left. And the other gentleman was standing right behind Marco Rubio. So we saw the people who the president was referring to. Nonetheless, when Marco Rubio is asked this question, I don't know, it's interesting to see his response here. It does seem almost like he's a little choked up here. But he's either choked up and doesn't know what to say, or he's tired of answering the question over and over.
He looks terrified. He's like,
Jordan, I explained again that the leverage that we have here is the leverage of the quarantine. So that is a Department of War operation, conducting, in some cases, law enforcement functions with the Coast Guard on the seizure of these boats. I'm obviously very intricately involved in these policies. And by the way, very intricately involved in moving forward. And what we hope to see some of these changes being addressed. Unfortunately, the person that was there before, who was not the legitimate president of the country, was someone we could not work with. Was someone that we could not. He had already suckered the Biden administration a couple of years ago on a deal he didn't keep. And this is someone we simply couldn't work with. We are hopeful that there are people in place now. We're going to find out. The proof will be in what they do or fail to do. That will start making some of these changes that will ultimately lead to a Venezuela that looks substantially and dramatically different from what's been in place for 15.
The worst freaking state to live in right now is Delaware, and nobody's...
All right, well, you left in the VP, and let's go back.
Ultimately lead to a Venezuela that looks substantially and dramatically different from what's been in place for 15 years.
All right, well, you left in the VP, and let's go back.
Well, yeah, and to Keith's defense, like, he's right. They did leave in the VP, so a lot of people are questioning how much of a change are these people actually going to see. But to Marco's point, like he said, you're going to see something way better than what you've seen in the last 50 years. Well, duh, we kind of hope that. Like, you guys better not go in there and do anything crazy because we'll be watching. But I don't suspect that they will, just because how the United States runs their own country. Nonetheless, we know it's going to be different, Marco, probably a little bit better, but that doesn't mean that people don't want to know what's your plan. You did just run up in there and, like, take a whole dude's wife, you know, and him, and we want to know, like, what's up, what's next. We already know Maduro's done. He's not going back. Like, it's a wrap for him. You got people, like, saying things like going in, some people, very small crowds, going in the streets to Venezuela saying things like, "We want our president back." El presidente, and it's like, bro, you might as well say bye to this guy. He's not ever coming back. If Trump has anything to do with it, and honestly, I can't see a president in the future coming in office and pardoning this dude. They wouldn't even do that because they're gonna pretty much deem him as a terrorist. And once that happens, you already know the United States, we don't rock with terrorists unless we're locking them up. So that's just kind of going to be what it is.
To this Atlantic article because the only other Venezuelan politician Trump spoke about yesterday was Maduro's own vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, and she was sworn in as interim president soon after Maduro's departure, but maintains that Maduro is a legitimate president and condemned his arrest. But Trump said that she had already told Marco Rubio that the new government in Caracas would do whatever the U.S. wanted, something that she's denied. So I actually don't know who to believe. I actually kind of believe that they're putting in some stooge who will not make things better for Venezuela, but are probably just going to make it so that they can rape that country for all of its oil and make lots and lots of money. Okay? Now, I just can't get over his face. I'm kidding. This man is in hell. This man is in hell. Now, he was asked what congressional authorization they had to do this. This is just some good career advice. Live your life in such a way that when you show up for work, you don't look like this. Okay? We don't all have to like what we do, but we can at least have integrity by the things that we do, where we do them. And this is a man who has sold his soul, and he is understanding that the soul isn't worth any price.
I'm still not clear on what the legal authority is for the United States to run the country of Venezuela, but several members of Congress and other legal experts have said this operation to take Maduro was illegal because you didn't seek congressional authorization. Why wasn't congressional authorization necessary?
It wasn't necessary because this was not an invasion. We didn't occupy a country. This was an arrest operation. This was a law enforcement operation. He was arrested on the ground in Venezuela by FBI agents, read his rights, and removed from the country. I encourage everyone, I know it's Sunday, people are busy, but the indictments have now been unsealed. People should read this indictment. They should read this indictment. They should read what this man did for the last 15 years of his life. You
want to read the indictment? Let's read the indictment. This is the first paragraph of the indictment. For over 25 years, leaders of Venezuela have abused their positions of public trust and corrupted once legitimate institutions to import tons of cocaine into the United States. Oh, Marco, I think you meant export. These, the stupidest people imaginable are running and making very important decisions that impact us all. Now, Marco Rubio was asked point blank, God, I can't get over his face. He was asked point blank how can you arrest Maduro for drug charges, but then Donald Trump pardoned one of the biggest drug kingpins in the world. And Marco Rubio's answer is probably not surprising.
The Congressional Gang of Eight has a history of not leaking, but you mentioned the indictment of Mr. Maduro, and of course it does detail his drug running operations. In the same jurisdiction, the former president of Honduras was actually convicted on similar charges, yet the president pardoned him. Here's what the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, had to say about that. He said, "You cannot credibly argue that drug trafficking charges demand invasion in one case while issuing a pardon in another." What's your response?
Well, the president has the pardon authority. He's the one that reviewed the file with the folks at the White House to make these pardon decisions, and I refer questions to them on it because I'm not involved in the pardon process. So I can't comment on that because I wasn't involved in that process. But the president...
I hate that answer so much. I wasn't involved in the pardon process, so I can't.
Yeah, I don't like that answer either. I mean, come on, Marco. You're the Secretary of State. That's crazy work. I think he should do better than that. Like, the fact that he just says, I'm not a part of that process, so you have to, talk to the people that know more about that process. I think we expect a better answer from the Secretary of State, but it's just... Dude, are they stressing Marco out? I think Trump's starting to stress him out, bro. Like, I think he's starting to get stressed out. I can't lie. Like, some of the way he's answering questions now compared to the beginning, like, I think Marco's always lost his temper during some of his, like, press conferences, because he always gets to the point where, depending on how you ask him the question, he'll be like, I don't know why this is hard for you to understand. I don't know why you don't understand what I'm saying. He always gets to that point, but I don't know. I think they're stressing him out.
I can't talk to you about that. What do you mean? You can't talk. You just like, do you not have an opinion? You not think for yourself? Are there no thoughts going on in your head that you can't just say what you feel like might be the double standard going on in this country? It's insane. In what other profession would you be asked for your opinion on something and you just say, well, I don't know. I mean, it's your job to know. It's literally your job to have an opinion. That is your job.
President outlined yesterday that he felt that in that particular case there was unfairness, and that there was unfairness in the way that individual was treated. And he also pointed to the fact that the party that's now won the elections in Honduras had asked for this. And so I would point to those comments as a rationale for it. In the case of Maduro, look, it's very simple. This guy was indicted. No one ever did anything about it. He didn't think he was under threat or that the indictment was ever going to be enforced. It was enforced yesterday.
Hernandez was convicted by a jury.
I understand. You're asking me, the pardon authority is something that, I'm not involved in my role. I'm not criticizing it. I can't just comment on it because I just wasn't involved in those deliberations.
Do you support it?
I wasn't involved in those deliberations. I haven't looked at the case file. I haven't looked at the arguments made.
Come on, Raphael. Now, I know you see what he just did there. Come on, bro. That's not a right way to answer that question. That's crazy. Raphael said he does know and explain himself very well. We already know Marco Rubio knows how to articulate himself. That's not what I'm saying. The level of dancing that he's doing is crazy. Like, George Stephanopoulos is asking him a question. He just keeps saying, I wasn't a part of it. I'm like, bro, Marco Rubio is smarter than this. He can answer if he literally just said to him, well, do you support it? He could just say yes or no. But I wasn't a part of it. I haven't read it. I'm like, bro, you're the Secretary of State. Like, what are we talking about here?
But, and you're asking me, the pardon authority is something that, I'm not involved in my role. I'm not criticizing it. I can't just comment on it because I just wasn't involved in those deliberations.
Do you support it?
I wasn't involved in those deliberations. I haven't looked at the case file. I haven't looked at the arguments made by, I've got a bunch of other things going on that are within my purview as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, but pardons aren't one of them. So I can't comment on a case that, frankly...
Well, this isn't the end of it either, because it's being reported in that same Atlantic interview that President Donald Trump issued a threat against Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, saying that if she doesn't do what's right, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro, adding that he would not stand for Rodriguez's, quote, defiant rejection of military intervention by the United States. Additionally, during the
Now, look at that tweet. Does that look friendly? Of course it doesn't. That's my point with Trump. Look at literally what it says. Come on, bro. President Donald J. Trump issued a threat against Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, saying that if she doesn't do what's right, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro, adding that he would not stand for Rodriguez's defiant rejection of military intervention by the United States. So he's like, guess what? If I try to bring in the United States military and Delcy tries to intervene with what I'm doing, she's probably going to pay a worse price than Maduro. I'm like, what are you going to do? Kidnap her in the middle of the night too? That's kind of crazy. Like, that's kind of... I mean, I don't know how she would pay a heftier price. Like, that's kind of worrisome for him to say that.
Interview, President Trump reaffirmed that Venezuela may not be the last country subject to American intervention, or even that would remain isolated in Latin America, clearly stating, quote, we do need Greenland, absolutely, while describing the island, which is a part of Denmark, a close ally member of NATO, as, quote, surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships. So this is not the end. I was saying to someone on the phone earlier, I was saying to a friend earlier today, that tyrants, when they have a taste of this sort of domination and power, they always go, the kids, this is really his first time tasting this level of power. And they never go, oh, no, I just needed a bite. That was good enough for me. I just wanted to taste. No. They suddenly get very hungry.
I'm going to eat the whole thing.
I mean, AI can now build a website in 90 seconds, while the only AI most people over 40...
And they start to expand. And they want to dominate more. Donald Trump, I do not put it past him that him and his administration are going to see this as the beginning, not an end. Not an end. I'm going to say this too. Yesterday, take this for what you will. Yesterday was one of those days. It wasn't as big as 9/11 in terms of the historic impact on our country, but 9/11 to me is the clearest example of a before and after day. A day where life will never be as it was before and will ever be changed after that day. I kind of feel the same thing about what happened yesterday. It's a before and after day. Life will never be the same before what Donald Trump did to Venezuela, and it's forever changed after it. So we'll see where this heads, but I just don't think it's anywhere good. I like to be optimistic. I'm not optimistic about this. I'm not. No, I'm a realist because I'm just looking at this reality. There's a way out of this. It has not revealed itself yet, but the first thing we have to do is when looking at this is one, seeing that Marco Rubio clearly understands they don't know what they're doing, and two, that this to do is when looking at this is one, seeing that Marco Rubio clearly understands they don't know what they're doing, and two,
I mean, it comes off like that, but I guess we have to see first, right? We have to see how they run it, how they actually run the country. I don't even know what to say about it because it's kind of like it's so crazy. Like so many people are like, "Oh my God, what is Trump doing?" Like we've never seen a president act like this, and I'm just like, I can't lie. It's this type of crazy stuff that he did last time that got my respect. You know what it is? Like it's like it could be the veteran in me. It could be the Marine in me. I don't know what it is, but it's like the crazy stuff gets my respect. You know what I mean? Like people are like, oh, so you support Donald Trump kidnapping people? I mean, if they're starving people, I don't think I care if he kidnapped them. I'm just being honest with you. I mean, that's not necessarily a person. I mean, if that's the type of person that we want, walking around just in government, like they're starving people, I don't think you should be in government. Shout out to Andy Smart. This is gangster stuff. I'm just saying, like, you either want a gangster for your president or you don't. Like, as long as he's not a gangster with the people, with his own people, that's one thing. But I said this on the live stream yesterday, guys. Like, you guys already know with my military mindset, come on, just blame it on the fact that I'm a Marine, right? We can't have somebody that's an ish as a president. We can't have an itch as a president. We just can't, right? Not when we got people that literally will sit there and threaten the United States with nukes, will threaten us with all kinds. Listen, I get it. Like some of you guys that are on the Democratic side or on the right or far, far left or even some far, far right, I might annoy you. But especially far, far left. You guys are going to be like, Q, I can't believe you're supporting Trump. Here's the favorite thing they say. This is my favorite thing they say. I can't believe you're supporting Trump. He hates black people. I'm like, oh my God, please find something else. First of all, I'm mixed. But I digress. That doesn't matter. It just cracks me up that's what people go to. No one cares. I told you guys already, as a veteran, I don't look at things like that. I don't care about people that hate me, right? I had to fight for people that hate me because I was a veteran. That's just how it works here in America. You know what I'm saying? When I was a Marine, I didn't get the chance to say, I'm only going to fight. I'm only going to support black people. Guidance, Simplify. We never understood fully that idea and look back of it all. Yep, true that. That's what I'm saying. Like the people that I had to fight for was the entire country, right? I say this on a live stream and I think I'll be saying this forever. I literally had to fight for people that hate me. Like, we understand how America works, right? I'm not saying all white people hate black people or Spanish people or nothing like that. I'm just saying in general, I had to fight for people that if I was in their part of town and they didn't especially like the level of melanin I had, because maybe it's a little too high for them, right? They would not treat me well, right? They might even want to kill me. Nonetheless, I still went to war for those people. So I don't care about this type of stuff. I'm just trying to tell you guys that we can't have an itch as a president. Like, we cannot. Trust me, as somebody who's went to war. This stuff matters. When you're electing a president, how he handles war, how he handles powerful countries, how he handles somebody like Putin. Listen, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I can't tell you how many times that I wanted Trump to put his foot up Putin's ass. I've been so upset sometimes. Like, I'm like, Trump, you got us looking like a bunch of... But at the same time, you know what I mean? I get it. Like, Trump has to be a lot more strategic with Russia. This is why when people are like, oh, well, why will he go over there and do that to Venezuela and not Putin? I'm like, bro, come on. Like, like, Venezuela versus Russia, we're comparing apples to oranges. This is not right. It's not the same thing. So we already know why he did this with Venezuela and why it hasn't been done with Russia. But nonetheless, the Marine side of me has wanted to see Trump just kind of go up in there and just, like, you know, just handle Putin. But I know he's not going to do it like that. Not Russia. I know he's not. So I have to respect that. Let's keep watching.
That this is not forever. This is not forever. And 3, it is so important that we do not tune this out. That is what authoritarians want. They want it so that you and I say, you know what, this is just too stressful, too anxiety inducing. I'm going to watch Disney Plus. I'm just going to put on reality TV. You know, whatever. This is it so that you and I say, you know what, this is just too stressful, too anxiety inducing. I'm going to watch Disney Plus. I'm just doing it so that not forever. This is not forever. And 3, it is so important that we do not tune this out. That is what authoritarians want. They want it so that you and I say, you know what, this is just too stressful, too anxiety inducing. I'm going to watch Disney Plus. I'm just going to put on reality TV.
Keith, don't be watching Disney Plus, bro. Come on, bro. Don't be watching no Disney Plus. Stop it.
You know, whatever. This is just too much, okay? That's the last thing we want to do right now. We want to stay engaged. And eventually, there'll be a moment for action. It's not here yet, but the action for now is just being engaged, staying informed, and getting prepared. But just because I'm not optimistic right now doesn't mean I don't think that eventually there'll be a moment for us to take action. There's not a lot we can do right now other than pay attention. But that is a lot. That's a lot more than most are doing. So good on you for doing it. And I'll see you soon. Bye.
But I don't know how I feel about him saying Disney Plus. That's crazy work. I don't watch I mean, he's right. We should not tune this out. I wouldn't even say that necessarily authoritative people want you to tune it out. I think that's just mainstream media in general. I think they like making fun of the American people when we don't pay attention to what's going on around us. So let's not tune this out. Let's pay attention to it. But we're definitely not tuning it out to watch no Disney Plus. That's crazy work. Yeah, that's just insane. So, all right, guys, let's get ready to move on to the next clip of the live stream. We got, where do I want to start from? Because I got some stuff going on in Texas that I do want to touch on. But do I want to go there? Let's go to MS Now. Flashes of Iraq war. So we got Texas State Representative James Tellerico denounces Trump Venezuela's strike. So those of you who don't know who James Tellerico is state rep who's going against Jasmine Crockett right now in Texas for a Senate seat. James is somebody who I've said on the live stream before we have to keep our eyes on. I've probably been clocking James about a year and a half or some change. I remember the first time I brought him up to my wife. Very interesting guy. Likes to mix religion and politics, which I have no problem with that. God is not afraid of politics at all. But the way he does it is rather interesting for someone who pays attention. So let's see what James has to say about this. Flashes of Iraq war. So he basically is denouncing and or condemning Trump's Venezuela strike. ads right here. Mm-hmm.
No. That's why I disconnected my phone.
Why are you taking that long? That's crazy.
All right, so Donald Trump and his allies are defending their operation against Venezuela, claiming the nation has been, quote, stealing oil from the United States for years. Trump's claim is in reference to the U.S. companies that built Venezuela's oil industry in the early 20th century, which Venezuela later nationalized in 1976. The New York Times reported at the time that those companies received approximately $1 billion in compensation. Joining us now, Texas State Representative James Talarico. He's also running for the U.S. Senate. It's great to see you again, State Representative Talarico. I wanted to actually start with a tweet that you posted that I think caught a lot of people's attention. Certainly one of the reasons why we invited you here. You put on X, you wrote, last year Trump promised American oil executives a great deal if they donated $1 billion to his campaign. Today, he gave them Venezuela, home to the largest oil reserves in the world. This new war is not only illegal and reckless, it is deeply corrupt. I thought we could start there and have you expand on that. You would represent the state of Texas if you're the senator from there, a state that obviously has some of the biggest oil interests in the world.
That's right. And I think we forgot about this story in 2024 when Donald Trump, then a candidate for the presidency, met with some of the biggest oil executives in the country. And Donald Trump, then a candidate for the presidency.
Now, I rewinded it a little bit. Those of you who haven't listened to James Talarico talk before, I really want you to pay attention. This guy is very charismatic. Not Zoran Mondani charismatic, but I would say his personality is a little bit drier than that. More cutthroat and more cut to the chase type of guy. But I mean, he's definitely gaining some traction. As far as him going against Jasmine Crockett in Texas, she's leading him now I think with a strong 8%. She's ahead of him. But he's doing better amongst younger white men and Latino men, which that's not shocking, right? Because Jasmine Crockett, I don't expect her to do well amongst that demographic. She's doing well amongst blacks, Latino women, I believe. I believe even some white liberal women. But when it comes to like young men or younger men and Latino men, she's not doing so well in that area. James Talarico, however, has gotten an endorsement, and he is doing well in that area, in that demographic. He is doing okay. So these two candidates, I encourage you guys to pay attention to who's going to take this Senate seat in Texas, because this is something that I'm clocking on the channel.
Met with some of the biggest oil executives in the country. And he promised them this, quote, great deal in exchange for $1 billion in campaign contributions. In response, those same oil executives flooded Donald Trump's campaign coffers with cash. And so on Saturday, Donald Trump thanked them with a gift. And that gift was the nation of Venezuela, home to the largest oil reserves in the entire world. And so promises made, promises kept. This war is illegal. It is reckless. I think that's been talked about a lot. But I think we also have to recognize how corrupt this new war is.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that Wall Street executives are already considering making a trip down to Venezuela. They're interested in investment opportunities. 20 officials from the finance, energy, and defense sectors are planning to go to Venezuela and meet with the new government. Do you see that as not just more evidence of sort of the potential relationships there and promises that he may have made on the campaign trail, but the possibility that there could have been some coordination here, frankly? It seems very early to have numerous executives already planning a trip when we barely know who if the vice president of the country wants to actually step in and lead right now, if Marco Rubio is actually running the country. Usually executives are really wary of going into countries with immense instability and tons of gangs that are heavily armed roaming around. So I was surprised to see that they were already interested in booking flights.
Yeah, me too. I think yesterday we saw flashes of the Iraq War. I'm 36 years old. I was 12. on September 11th, 2001, I saw the importance of keeping this country safe. As a millennial, I also saw how military disasters like the Iraq War robbed this nation of young lives, of billions of dollars, and of our moral standing in the world. How do you look a parent in the eye and tell them you sacrificed their child's life for big oil's bottom line? I've said from the beginning of this campaign that the biggest divide in this country is not left versus right, it's top versus bottom. And this new war is just the latest example of how billionaires run this country, run this economy, run this government, and now run our foreign policy. As U.S. Senator, I will never vote to send someone's son or daughter to war to make billionaires richer.
What do you think Democrats can be doing right now, James, in terms of the powers? They obviously don't control the Senate. They don't control the House. And it seems this president is hell-bent on potentially going and doing the same in Cuba. He threatened Mexico. He's threatened Colombia. And again, as of this evening, threatening Greenland, which is part of a NATO ally country. So what do you do if you're a sitting member of the U.S. Senate and you're a Democrat?
Well, I think Democrats across the country at all levels of government, particularly in our federal government, need to be educating our constituents on what's happening and why it's happening. And then we need to organize. Your previous guest said that we need Americans across the political spectrum, across this country, taking to the streets.
So have you guys ever heard James talk before? Because those of you that are like, I've heard him speak a couple of times. I've actually heard him give a sermon. So he actually has preached at a couple of churches in Texas. Usually when he preaches, he has a trans flag behind him and a gay flag behind him in the pulpit. But I'm just wondering if any of you guys in the chat have heard him before. Super charismatic guy, very well spoken, articulates himself well. I think he's very clear cut and straight to the point. I think he does well when he does his press conferences and when he talks to people. And he's doing extremely well amongst white men in general in Texas, and I believe Latino men as well. So here, it's in that demographic where I believe Jasmine Crockett is getting a run for her money.
To protest this illegal, reckless, and corrupt war. And last election, we saw voters coming together to reject these types of military interventions. And Donald Trump promised to be the peace candidate. He has now done the exact opposite, not just here, but in other places all over the world. So we desperately need leaders in Washington who are going to speak out against this new war and who are going to organize Americans to push back against it.
Has your office heard from any Hispanic constituents in the last 24 or so hours? I ask because, of course, many members of the diaspora, not just of Venezuela, but the Cuban diaspora, they were actually crying tears of joy. They understand that what comes next is very uncertain, that there are legal questions around all of this, but Maduro caused immense harm. In some cases, their families lost everything. And so I wonder if it poses a challenge to Democrats as they message around this and try to say we don't support the way in which this is done, but we also acknowledge the harm that this man who's now being, going to be in front of a judge tomorrow here in New York, that he's done to you and generations.
I mean, I'm glad that's being acknowledged because at one point I was going to say, dude, are we good? Or are we crazy? Because like I said before, it's not like Trump went to a country and took some country's pope. That's not the question here. You do have some people that, even on the left, they didn't understand. I'm not going to say, I don't know, maybe they were ignorant to a fault. Maybe it's an ignorant is bliss type of thing. But just not understanding how bad the guy was. And I just really felt bad for them because I'm like, who do you think the guy went to? Oh my God, Donald Trump's a kidnapper. And I'm just like, who do you think that he stole? You think that he stole like some 9-year-old kid or some teenager that was like serving at a church or something? Come on, man. Maduro wasn't that type of person.
In your family.
We're Phoenix Energy, a family-owned oil company focused on unleashing American oil from North Dakota.
That's right. We have to hold both thoughts in our head at the same time. Maduro was an authoritarian, a ruthless dictator, but you don't respond to authoritarianism abroad with authoritarianism at home. And the way this new war has been launched is illegal, it's unconstitutional, and it's unacceptable. And so we have to hold both thoughts in our head at the same time. We've got to push back against how this war has been conducted so far so that we can save American lives, American dollars, and America's moral standing going forward.
Your campaign obviously is going to be one of the most important and closely watched. The Democratic primary is just 2 months away. It'll be the first, one of the first major ones in the country. How do you, or what is the message that you have for voters in your state, broadly speaking, about this moment in our country and what you're hearing from them about what this or how this ranks as a priority for them?
Well, our country needs us right now. We all have to step up in ways both big and small to serve America in her hour of need. I'm stepping up to run for the U.S. Senate, but your viewers can step up by volunteering for campaigns like ours. They can step up by running for office themselves. They can step up by organizing and protesting. We've all got to do our part in this dark moment in our country's history. And I think we all have to be committed to confronting the corrupt political system that made someone like Donald Trump possible. We don't want to just defeat Donald Trump. We want to defeat the system that gave rise to him. And that includes taking on corruption head on.
Yeah, the man is smart. He has a plan on how to flip, right? He has a plan. We have to campaign. Shout out to MS Now. The next clip he talks about, we have to campaign for something. Representative James Tellerico on how he plans to flip deep red Texas, right? Do I think it's going to work? Not entirely. Do I think a lot of it weighs heavily on how Trump's administration does now for the economy and for the people? I do. Have you guys looked at the stock market today? It's performing substantially well, but it has been performing substantially well other than today. But these are the things that matter, right? Maybe not for, I can't even say no longer the average middle class person, right? Most people now are actually invested into some type of 401k or some type of retirement or portfolio plan way more now than we ever have been before, and especially within the last 25 to 50 years. So especially, and that's amongst all that's up across all age demographics. It's especially up amongst blacks and young blacks. And it's especially up amongst younger men. So when I sit there and I take a look at that, it really does depend on just how Trump's cabinet performs for the economy and how he performs. I mean, you do well for people's retirement. You do well for their pockets. I mean, money is usually the thing that gets the people moving, right? So if you can grow their money, you usually can get their vote, right? But let's just see if that happens. James Tellerico, he talks an interesting game. I'm not going to lie. He talks an interesting game. Not to mention, he's built a $13 million fundraising machine, and I think it's up to $16 million. But I was like, dude, this guy is building some substantial capital. So let's take a look at some of his plans on how he plans to flip deep red Texas.
Officially election year, with all 435 House seats and another 35 Senate seats up for grabs. The first primaries are now just 2 months away as Democrats aim for a blue wave, even in the reddest states, after a massive off-year election sweep. We'll start to get some answers on March 3rd in North Carolina and Arkansas, and the crowded Democratic contests in Texas, a state that hasn't seen a Democrat win statewide office in 30 years. Now, for voters there, the Tribune calls it, quote, their first chance to make their opinions known on the events of the last 12 months. And that includes plummeting ratings for Donald Trump in the first year of his second term as he approaches lame duck status, thanks to voter concerns about the cost of living and his aggressive redistricting campaign. More from the Tribune today, in part writing, Democrats enthusiastic about a midterm election in a Trump year and taking advantage of Republicans' bruising primary are bullish on the Senate race. The last time Trump was in the White House, but not on the ballot, Democrats came within 3 percentage points of taking down Senator Ted Cruz.
Visualize yourself at the end of the year. Where do you want to be? So this is how I used Claude to help me think different.
Texas State Representative and U.S. Senate candidate James Tallarico joins me now. State Representative, it's great to have you on the show. We're 2 months away. You're out there talking to voters in Texas every day. Tell us about what you're hearing from them and their frustrations right now.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a backlash growing in the state of Texas and across the country to the extremism and the corruption that we're all seeing in Washington, D.C. You know, Trump and the Republican Party campaigned last year on making things less expensive, putting working families first, draining the swamp. All that sounded really good to folks here in Texas, including to some of my extended family members and friends of mine who voted for Donald Trump in the last election. But just 1 year later, everything is more expensive because of the president's disastrous tariff policies. Everything is hurting working families more than ever. You've seen their effort to increase premiums for millions of Texans and millions of Americans. And corruption is the worst it's ever been in Washington. The president's spending millions of dollars on a gold-plated ballroom instead of helping working people in our state. So our job is to organize that backlash so that we can produce results at the ballot box in November.
And to that point, nationally, Mr. Tallarico, the Democratic Party and its candidates, they lead in many prominent polls, and that does typically happen for the party that is out of power. Do you think, though, there's something bigger happening this time around, given the frustrations that you just outlined?
I do. I see this frustration spanning the political spectrum. It's not just among Democrats, but it's among independents. It's among some Republicans. It's also among voters who feel disillusioned with both political parties. And so if we're going to win in a state like Texas, we've got to energize Democrats.
Johnny, I'm not going to lie. There are people that agree with you, right? When it comes to James Tallarico. I don't know if they're calling him beta male, but some people have said that he's kind of soft. They think he's a little bit soft-spoken. I mean, dude, he has somewhat of a stoic attitude. You know what I'm saying? He's very put together. Very calm, very cool, very collected. Now, I want you to think about this when we're comparing this to Jasmine Crockett, right? Like, I get it. Never trust another Democrat, never. Like, I totally get it, Johnny. But it's like, this is kind of like, for Texas, it's going to be, you got to choose the lesser of the two evils. Sorry, guys, I was going to say the greater. The lesser of the two evils, right? So it's like, you got Jasmine Crockett. Some of the stuff that texting here, we don't claim them. But listen, some of the stuff that Jasmine Crockett has went viral for, it's not some of the greatest stuff, right? Like I said, she's 8%, I believe, last time I checked, ahead of him in the polls. But she's performing very well amongst black people. That's not surprising. Well amongst Latino people, mainly women and white liberal women, right? But when it comes to Caucasian men, especially younger and Latino men, she's not doing so well. And that's probably because of the reasons that she's went viral for, right? Like going crazy on people like MTG in some of her Senate hearings, going off on Nancy Mace, just kind of like flipping out all of the time. Whereas James Tallarico, he's already got some major endorsements from like some pretty notable country singers, some guys with a lot of money in Texas, right? I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, I'm glad that she's performing well against the black community and Hispanic women and, you know, probably white liberal women, but that's not the majority. Like, if the majority in Texas goes out and vote and it's white males and it's Latino men, then James Tallarico is going to take that election, right? That's something that I can see. So I don't know how Jasmine Crockett is going to be able to flip that demographic, because she does not perform well with the Caucasian men and the Latino men. So I'm not sure how she's going to do that. But unless a lot of people just plan on not going out to vote, I can see James Tallarico taking it. Right, I really can, especially if she's not able to flip that particular demographic, which I think she's going to have a really hard time with.
We have to peel off some moderates, some independents, and maybe even some Republicans. And then we've got to bring in some of these new voters, particularly young voters, who are pretty frustrated with this broken political system. If we can do all of those things, we have a real shot at winning here in Texas and securing a Senate majority in 2027.
And let me ask you about the messaging, because a lot of people have pointed out, just seeing what happened this past year with the off-year elections where Democrats won in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia. What should Democrats focus their messaging on when it comes to these races? Is it simply about running against Trump and what Trump has done, or is it offering something else?
Yeah, we've got to be campaigning for something instead of just campaigning against something. Donald Trump and the Republicans have fumbled the football, but that football is not going to run itself into the end zone. That's going to be on us. And so our campaign is putting forward a vision of how we can make life more affordable, how we can combat corruption and make government work for us again, how we can fight for education and healthcare and housing. These are all things that I've been able to win on in the Texas legislature as a Democrat in a Republican-dominated body. I've been able to score real victories for working people, and I want to take those fights to the U.S. Senate so that we can actually deliver results for folks here in Texas and across the country.
Hey, James, it's Tim Miller with the Bulwark Famous Now. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year. Eamon mentioned in the intro there that Democrats haven't won statewide in Texas in 30 years. And I'm just kind of wondering, as you look back at some of those past races, I mentioned Beto's race in 2018 where he lost by only 3 points. What do you see as things that have almost worked for Democrats that you want to borrow from? And what about things that you want to do differently? I mean, doing the same thing over and over again and just getting the same results is the definition of insanity. What do you think you can do different than some of the past Democratic candidates who haven't won?
Well, I know we've all had our hearts broken by Texas many times before, mostly those of us who live here, because we're the ones who have to live under this extremism and this corruption. And if you look at the last 15, 20 years in Texas, statewide campaigns have gotten more competitive, not less. We haven't broken through yet. We haven't won a statewide race yet. But the trend line is moving in our direction. I remember when I was growing up in Texas, Republicans would win by 25, 30 points statewide. Now they consistently win by single digits. So I think to actually break through and finally get that statewide win, we've got to do a few things. We've got to energize Democrats. We've got to bring in new voters, particularly young voters. And then we've got to peel off some independents and even some Republicans. If we can do all of those things, I think we have a real shot at winning here. And I will just tell you, Tim, I have done this before. I got elected to the state house by flipping a Trump district that Democrats hadn't won in 30 years in Williamson County, Texas. Yeah. And I was able to build a big coalition, a big tent.
And that's something that's pretty impressive about him. A lot of people can't do that. And he's a young guy that has done that. So I have a lot of faith in James Tellerico. Just in the sense, I get it. Johnny's like, Texas don't claim this beta boy. I get it. And there's a lot of people that don't. And that's why I think Jasmine Crockett is 8% in the lead right now. Where a lot of people don't support that either. But like I said, it's about picking the lesser of the two evils, Johnny. We got to pick somebody, right? We got to pick somebody. And it's always going to be like that, right? But like I said, the guy, I don't know if you guys have ever heard him preach, but I've actually heard him preach before. So if you go on YouTube and you type in James Tellerico's name and you type in his name and sermon after it, a lot of the sermons that he's preached in churches in Texas will come up. Very interesting to watch. You guys should check it out.
That produced a victory with 51% of the vote. And I think that's what we're going to have to do statewide if we're going to win this Senate seat.
So to follow up on that, and you talked about energizing new voters, James, 2025 was the year that Texans watched the Republican-controlled legislature pass a new map, as demanded by Donald Trump, to basically hand the Republicans up to 5 more House seats in the midterms. Is this something that you hear from daily when you're speaking to Texan voters? And do you think that is going to backfire against Republicans in your state? Could that be a factor that brings out people to the polls?
Absolutely. I led the quorum break over the summer when my fellow Texas Democrats and I left our state and went to Chicago to shine a national spotlight on this redistricting power grab. And in the process, we inspired millions of Americans, including folks in other states like California, to get in the fight and to push back against this kind of corruption. We usually think corruption is something that involves money, and that's true a lot of the time, but corruption is really just the betrayal of the public's trust. And that's what we've seen in this redistricting power grab. Folks who are in power, like Donald Trump, they want to hang on to power at all costs. And so they're trying to subvert the public's will at the ballot box. And so I think you're going to see lots of folks showing up in this next election to push back against this kind of corruption. Young people in particular. If I'm elected as the next U.S. Senator from Texas, I'll be the youngest U.S. Senator in America. And so I think my fellow millennials, but also Gen Z, are ready for a new generation to step up and lead this country into the future.
Yep, and like I said, that's one thing I said, that the guy will be one of the youngest. Like, I mean, he's talented. Like him, love him, hate him, it is what it is. Over here, we're going to give flowers where flowers is due. We don't have to necessarily like it, but Democrat policies are terrible for Americans. Johnny, you're not the only person that feels like that, brother. I can't even lie to you. I can't tell you how many times, whether people jump in the chat and say that, or whether they just feel like that a lot of people feel that way, right? Especially when they are far, 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 far left. Somebody like, I don't know, presidential candidate, possible presidential candidate for 2028 AOC, maybe, right? That's a little far. It's like, yeah, some people, Les Judy said both parties suck. Yeah, you know, that's where, I think that's where a lot of sensible Americans should land, right? Because this is why we have mainstream media always lying to us. I don't want to watch both sides, but I have to watch both sides because that's the only way that I get half the truth. It's ridiculous, right? And then they want to get mad that their ratings are going down, and they're like, oh, why are people watching Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro and Theo Vaughn and Tucker Carlson and you know, people like the Black Perspective, basically all these YouTube, you know, reporting news media channels. And it's like, because you guys are full of it, because you're lying, and we get tired of watching your lies. So that's exactly what happens. All right, guys, let's wrap this live stream up. I will be back. You guys already know we're gonna have some fun with late night news. So I'll see you guys. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Love yourselves. Love one another. Be peaceful. Tell somebody about Jesus. See you in a few. Peace.